And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 72. On today's episode, we're going to talk some draft strategy, recap the LABR mixed draft that took place Tuesday night. And in order to do so, I'm joined by a guest. You can find him on Lenny Melnick, fantasysports.com. Has a podcast called Ditka Sausage and Fantasy Sports, which is really, really good stuff there. He's on Twitter at DonkeyTeeth87. DonkeyTeeth, how we doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Bubba.
No, thanks for coming on. It's a pleasure getting to have you on here and picking your brain on some different strategies and whatnot. I've gotten to know you in the last few months with all these preps for drafts. We're in one of the slowest mock drafts on the planet right now, but it's good because, I put that on the bottom of the outline, but I just want to ask you a few questions on that first. As you can tell, we'll go off the rails a few times here. But what's your thoughts on this mock draft? How do you like how it's playing out? Because I know it's based out of the Great Fantasy Invitational we're going to be playing in. I believe we both have the second pick, so I picked third in this one. How are you liking it?
Other than the pace, I like how things are going. I told Justin, we had him on our podcast. Justin Mason's running the Invitational for everybody, and I told him he's got pick number 2 as well. I'd almost rather be later in the draft. We'll get into it in the strategy here, but I'm kind of in on pitchers early this year, and you got to take Altuve or Trout if somebody happens to take Altuve first at number 2. I assume you're in the same boat there, and then you kind of get stuck on the way back in the second round with, is there still a pitcher worthy of taking in the second round, or are you going to double up on bats? It's just kind of no man's land. I like getting one of those 4 aces this year personally, so I like getting this practice in just to see how I want to build my team and try different things out. What's your opinion on pick number 2?
Yeah, I agree. It's a kind of a good and a bad, a good, the bad, the ugly thing where you get Trout or Altuve, which is outstanding. You get basically 2 MVPs, so 2 of the best players in baseball. But yeah, you kind of get handcuffed. Like you took DeGrom as your first pitcher. I have Bumgarner. It's like they're not horrible, but every other mock I've been doing, somehow I end up in the back end of the draft, and I love how those turn out. I've gone pitcher power, and it's so much better. Like you said, we'll get that on the strategy, but like looking at my team, I take Trey Turner out of the 3 spot just because his steal advantage is so tremendous, and now I might have to rethink that. But I was trying to get someone that's kind of close to Altuve in that range and kind of go off of that, and I don't know. It doesn't feel right, especially the pitching part, like you were saying.
Yeah, I feel like you end up reaching. I'm probably going to end up going pitcher in the second and that second, third turn. But just kind of hope that somebody falls there. I was hoping Bumgarner would fall, and you snagged him right before me. I know we talked with Justin Mason yesterday. He's a big Giants fan, and he's off of Bumgarner this year. I'm on board. I believe in the guy. I think that, he's not going to put up the number 1 numbers. He's not going to be the number 1 pitcher, but I really think that he's a pretty safe top 5 guy, even with the shoulder issues. I think even if he's not 100%, he's one of those gamers that's going to figure out how to pitch and get it done with what he's got. Kind of like Justin Verlander a few years ago. We saw that velocity come down with him, and he just kind of had to reinvent himself. And I think Bumgarner is one of those guys that's just always going to be a good pitcher for his entire career, and he's out to prove people wrong. So I like that pick there at 28.
Yeah, as a Giants fan myself, I've watched Bumgarner plenty. I'm not worried about the shoulder because he even came back and he looked good, not great, but he's got a full off season. It's like, what everyone wants to say. He's coming to camp looking great, best shape of his life. Right. But the one thing with Bumgarner, you hit on it, is he's like a workhorse. And Matt Modica said it best, and he's tweeted it out many times. There aren't many 200 inning guys. There's not really many 175 plus inning guys with the stuff Bumgarner has. So even if he's not the ace, he's a good ace to a fantasy staff if you miss out on those top 4, like you were mentioning. So I have no problem with him at all. It's just the way some of the other positions play out when you're doing this. It's like it's not the worst team, and maybe it'll work out because it's kind of more balanced, but it's not flashy by any means.
Right.
Let's get into some fantasy draft strategy talk, which I really enjoy this topic because it's kind of free-flowing. There's so many different ways to play fantasy baseball, which makes it great. There's so many different people that like it so many different ways. So we'll kind of hit the main points, and then we'll kind of hop around here. But we'll start in the head-to-head categories, kind of the way fantasy started. People say it's, well, I played this when I played football, so I come over to baseball, I'm going to play head-to-head. What's kind of your thoughts on head-to-head, and how do you approach your head-to-head leagues?
Well, yeah, I'll start by saying I did start out in head-to-head as well. I think that's just kind of a typical home league thing when you're growing up, play with all your buddies and do the head-to-head matchups. Personally, as I've gone on, I've come to enjoy Roto more and more. I get tired of having great head-to-head teams, or what feels like great head-to-head teams, and losing. I guess as I got into Roto, I started to understand where I might have been going wrong. I won a decent amount of head-to-head leagues, but I also felt like I had amazing teams and would lose. And I guess as I got into Roto, I understood head-to-head better. Like, I'd kind of been drafting Roto teams in head-to-head leagues for the first 10 years of my fantasy baseball career, if you will. And so in head-to-head leagues now, first of all, I tried to avoid picking up new head-to-head leagues. All my head-to-head leagues are with my friends from home, and standard keeper leagues that I've had going for a while. And the way that I'm approaching them is choosing, if it's a 5x5 league, I'm choosing 7 categories to go after aggressively and punt in 3, and adjusting my rankings and valuations accordingly. There's no need in a head-to-head league, especially a competitive one, to try to win all 10 categories every week. All you need to do is win, 6-4 or 7-5 or 7-3 majority of weeks, and you're going to end up doing pretty darn well. I guess as far as specific strategy, talking strategy, and I actually just wrote an article for Lenny over at Lenny Melnick Fantasy Sports on strategy. It hasn't been published yet. We're doing a draft guide that's going to be published out there sometime in the next week or so, I think. So look out for that. But I wrote the article, and there's a lot of different variables to each individual league that you really have to consider before you're able to make your draft strategy. Starting with how many teams are in the league, what roster positions you use, how many bench spots you've got, how moves are made, if you can change your lineup daily or weekly, what categories are used, obviously, and then, like we're talking about now, what type of league you're in, head-to-head categories, head-to-head points, or Roto League, I guess, are the top 3 standard leagues. So you got to look at those things first, obviously, to determine what types of players you want to value higher than everyone else is going to be valuing, and which players to disregard, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, definitely. You mentioned it when you're talking about the head-to-heads, and I'm with you. That's how I started out, and I prefer Roto 100% now, because, like you said, you could have a great head-to-head league team, and maybe it struggles for a week or two, and it kills your whole season, because that's just how the cookies crumble. But in the end, in Roto, if you have a great team, it should be there in the end. When you're talking head-to-head, you mentioned size of leagues, and it affects rotos and points. But like, when you're talking your sizes, what size leagues do you prefer? Because I've pretty much been stuck on 12 for a while. The Invitational will be like my first real big 15-team league. What do you prefer?
I much prefer a deeper league, 15 or deeper. I started out in 12, and then I picked up 10-team, and these were head-to-head leagues. And, it's really difficult in the shallower leagues like that. And I call 10, 12-team leagues shallower leagues, because you have to make really tough decisions throughout the year on who you want to add and drop. And, somebody can leave the draft with just a god-awful team that looks totally lost and be an advantage, because they've got so many players that they're like ready to drop immediately, and they can snag all those, Tommy Phams of last year, and Justin Smoke and Logan Morrison, all these guys that just come out of nowhere every single year. You can land those in 10 and 12-team leagues, even 15-team leagues. You're going to land those guys off the wire, but it's much easier in a 15-team league when you've got these schmoes on the end of your bench that, you didn't even really want to draft anyway, that you weren't totally sold on, you know, you got these guys that you can cut right off the bat. So that's what I like about deeper leagues. Obviously, there's no right answer. It's all preference. It's a whole different game playing in shallower leagues. It's, for me, if I'm in a 10-team league or a 12-team league, it's all about getting the top bats, and I'm willing to package together, you know, 4 guys that are, you know, in the 60 to 100 ranked range to get a first-round guy, no problem. And then I got those extra bench spots or the roster spots to play around with and pick guys. And, you know, in 12-team leagues, it just becomes who can pick up the best pickups. Also, another factor in draft strategy is how pickups are handled in your league. Obviously, there's draft and hold leagues where you can't make any pickups. There's, you know, leagues where you only get a couple a week. There's leagues where you get, you know, 100 a year or something like that. And then there's leagues where it's unlimited. And in those leagues, if you've got unlimited pickups, you're just, you know, pick up a new guy every day and accumulate those stats, right?
Yeah, and that's a league I can't stand. At least put a minimum on it or something. But do you prefer, and I do you prefer fab over just willy-nilly pick up whatever you want?
Yeah, I do. I like having that that budget to play around with, and it makes everything a little bit more interesting.
This is kind of more of an in-season strategy, and we'll get back to the draft. But when you're playing with your fab, do you go, you know, crazy out the gate, or do you try to kind of save it throughout the year? Because baseball, unlike football, you got to win right away or you're screwed. Baseball's such a long season, you have some luxury even in a head-to-head to lose a few weeks. How do you treat your fab budget?
I'm a little bit more conservative with it out of the gates. Again, it does depend on the league type and, you know, what kind of players are going to be available throughout the year and who happens to come up. If somebody drops a great player in a deeper league right off the bat, then I'm maybe more prone to spend up 30-40% of my budget and go crazy like that. If it's a guy that I'm really confident that, hey, this guy's going to be a top 50 player or something like that, and these guys aren't going to come along. But, you know, it's really nice to have that money to play around with, especially down the stretch when you know what categories you need. If we're talking roto, and you know what where you need to make your pushes.
Okay. Another head-to-head question is, you did mention how you when you're drafting, you're approaching it like, okay, I need to win 7 categories a week. It makes 100% of sense. Let's break it down a little more for the listeners. So when you're looking at it, I've heard the philosophy is I don't care about relievers because saves are one category, where if I go get a bunch of good pitchers, this, that, and the other, I can get 3 or 4 categories taken care of. Maybe you don't focus as much on like Billy Hamilton steals guys because steals is one category. Go get the bopper that's going to score runs and hit homers. Kind of how do you approach the categories per se? If we're doing standard categories, in a minute we'll kind of go into some of the newer categories that people are starting to delve into.
Yeah, so this year, if we're talking 5x5 head-to-head league, the strategy that I'm really mulling over right now is punting wins, actually, and disregarding starting pitchers, because I think there's a premium on starting pitchers across the industry, and that's going to obviously trickle down to all leagues, what people are saying, which I think is right. There should be a premium on them, like we were just talking with the Invitational. In roto leagues, they're so valuable getting those top arms. And in my roto leagues last year, it was just a total bloodbath in pitching categories. Hundredths of points in ERA and WHIP made up the difference between, you know, first and fifth place in some leagues. Oh, yeah. So I think that's fair that pitchers are being valued so highly this year, especially when you consider the power landscape, the baseballs they're using, whatever the heck's going on. There's a ton of power, and it's available later in drafts. But in head-to-head leagues, who cares? You know, I can disregard starters, load up on high K relievers, and, you know, punt wins and Ks, and, you know, maybe be competitive some weeks if I throw somebody out there, see how it goes, and then punt steals. And because, you know, steals are costing a premium this year too across the industry, I'd say. So I think those are the 2 categories that I'm targeting, is steals and starting pitchers, basically. And if I do that in a 5x5 league, then I'm going to go ahead and just load up on power bats early and try to grab a couple of top closers, reach a little bit ahead of their ADP and grab a couple of those guys, and then load up on closers, win saves every week, win the ratios in pitching every week, ERA and WHIP should be pretty easy. Grab some of the high case setup men later in the draft, and then just load up on the power bats with high average. It seems like a no-brainer to me. I guess it depends, what everybody else is doing in your draft. If everybody's doing that, then you kind of pivot and do something else. But I don't think that that's going to be a typical strategy across head-to-head leagues. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it definitely isn't a typical one. It makes a ton of sense. I've heard that philosophy lately is, take those middle reliever type guys, setup men that have the great ratios and have good strikeout ratios and whips and ERA, all that stuff we're looking for, and load up on that to keep. There's 3 categories there. You can dominate if you do it right. The only concern I have is, and it's not that way in all leagues, is if you have like an innings cap per week. And there will be a guy we'll talk about in the LABR draft who I asked him a question about his pitching staff, and he's concerned about the innings cap. If it's just a 20 innings limit or whatever, which I've had in most of my leagues, that's no big deal. You should be able to, especially if you grab a guy like a Davinsky or something like that, it'll get you 3, maybe 6, if he comes out there twice a week, 6 innings or so. So you can definitely work with that. So I like that philosophy a lot, and I agree. Get those power bats in there and go that direction, then go get a bunch of Zach Godleys of the world if you need starters that direction. Otherwise, stick with the bullpens like you're saying. So, yeah, I definitely do see that angle in head-to-heads. Let's go to Roto here for a little bit because it's kind of what we both like a lot more. It's definitely different. You mentioned the pitching, and it's top-heavy. You have the big 4 this year, then you kind of have a middle tier of like Strasburg and Bumgarner, then another smaller group with Thor and company. Then it drops off pretty good. How do you approach your rotisserie drafts differently than your head-to-heads, I guess?
Well, like we said, you're not punting any categories in a Roto league. It just doesn't make sense if you're in a competitive league to be punting. I could see maybe punting saves and then just picking them up throughout the season. I know a lot of people like to do that, especially in auction leagues, and just pick up some $1 to $2 closers and stuff like that. But generally, I'm not punting any categories in a Roto league. I'm trying to build a balanced squad. The way that I've come to approach my Roto leagues, and I've had a lot of success with this over the past couple of years, is determining what I'm going to need to win the league. So how I do that is most of my leagues have been going on for a while. Even the redraft leagues I'm in have been going for several years. So I'll take a look at the standings last year and see what the point total it took to win the league, and then divide that by the amount of categories. So say it's a standard 5x5 and 120 points or whatever won the league. Divide 120 by the 10 categories. You need 12 points on average across the categories to come out as the winner of the league. And then just go through the standings and see how many home runs, how many runs, how many strikeouts, how many wins it would take to get the 12 points. And then I just keep track of those milestones or benchmarks or goals, whatever you want to call them, throughout the draft. It's much easier to do in slow drafts. I'm a big fan of slow drafts. You get time to think about your picks. You get time to really consider how you're building your team. And it's easier to add up your projections and statistics as you go and make sure that you're healthy in every category. And then at the end of the draft, you might be weaker in one place or another place, but going into the year, okay, now I need to focus on saves, or I need to focus on, picking up low whip guys or power or RBIs or steals or whatever. You know what your weakness is, if you need average or whatever. So that's my favorite way to go into Rotos. Do you use that approach?
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. It's a great approach. I'll build like kind of an Excel sheet that I'll have open at all times, and I have it on the bottom. I have kind of the baseline like you're talking about that, last year you needed this many homers, this many steals, so on and so forth, like you're talking about. And then as you draft, I use the projections and I fill them in with each player, and it just keeps accumulating as we go to let me know I'm kind of hitting those targets, kind of like exactly what you're talking about. I think it's a great approach. People don't, I think, utilize that enough. They kind of more go, okay, like mentally they just think they have enough of something, and you might have a good amount, but how do you really know? And it is very interesting, and there's a bunch of draft softwares out there you can use that'll do the same thing for you. I know Justin talks about a bunch that he loves, and there's some other ones coming out there. I just do the Excel sheet, but there's a lot of ways to do it, and it does help a ton because at least it gives you an idea on when you're drafting. to me, it comes in handy when, you know, you might have your own personal rankings, or you might be going off an ADP sheet or a tier sheet or something. And when you're narrowing it down between two picks at your time of the pick, well, you might need this stat over this stat a lot more, and it helps you make that pick a lot better and get your team where it needs to go. So I agree with that completely. And it also, like you said, a great point is you're not going to be perfect in every category leaving the draft unless you just knocked one out of the park. It lets you know exactly where you need to focus on either the waiver wire, early trades, whatever you have to do. So, yeah, I think that's a great strategy to use and definitely comes into play when you're looking at it. When we're talking categories, standard 5x5, wins is always a big point of contention with people. Batting average is a big point of contention. Saves, I've moved a lot to saves holds in leagues. I like the idea of quality starts, but I'd like to fine tune what a quality start is. And then I like the OBP format. What's your thoughts on some of these new categories that are coming about?
Yeah, I like OBP as well. You know, I'll adapt to whatever, more or less. I'm kind of indifferent. I do prefer, you know, a standard 5x5 versus getting into like the 6x6s. I do have some of those leagues, and you know, it's fun.
I'd rather not do 6x6. That's for sure.
But you know, I've got a head-to-head league, and it's like 10x10, and you know, it's what am I doing? You know,
yeah,
it's a whole different league. So, and well, you know, that's one thing with head-to-head. If you get into head-to-head leagues with more categories, then each category becomes less valuable. You know, so you really got to think, if you're in these crazy, you know, 14 category leagues, or you know, 20 category leagues like I'm talking about, which categories you're going to go after, which ones make sense, which ones are most highly correlated, and which ones, like maybe steals, you don't really care about. You know, it's a solo category. Like home runs, okay, you get runs, you get RBIs, you get home runs, and like there's total base leagues. There's all kinds of crazy leagues out there. So you just got to really use rational thinking when you're going into your draft to determine what makes most sense for this league. And the crazier, the more unique these leagues get, the more thinking it takes. They're going to be a little bit different than the standard rankings that you're seeing out there in the industry, because those are made for 5x5 roto leagues, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And when you're filling out your kind of projections as you draft, like I said, the Excel sheet, you have your format as well. Do you use last season's stats to use your own projections? I like to use Steamer projections. Those seem to be pretty good. I know Rob Silver makes his own. Todd Zola makes his. What do you use as your baseline as you're filling out those stats?
Yeah, the last couple of years I've used my own, and this year I've actually gone towards using Steamer. They're a little bit more conservative. You know, if I like a guy more, well then, you know, I'm expecting him to outperform that Steamer projection, but why not just put it in there as that, and then if I get more, then great, you know?
Yeah, it leaves a really good floor, which I like, because like you said, if they outproduce that, well, now if you needed 12 points in that category, this could burst you into the first place in that category, which obviously will portray throughout the rest of your standings. So that's why I like the fact that they are conservative.
Yeah, and I'll say, keeping an Excel spreadsheet in a quick draft, if you've got like a 30-second pick clock or something like that, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, exactly. So it is helpful. You know, Razzball has a good, they call it a war room on there. I've used that before. The projections, I mean, I don't know if they put Gray's projections in there. I don't think they're pulling Rudy's math. Maybe they do use Rudy's projections. Whatever they are, you know, I don't really care. I'm just trying to get a general idea of where I'm at. You know, if they say I'm great in one character, they also have goals in there, but you've really kind of got to disregard the goals that they use, because they're just not right. I'll tell you that off the top.
Yeah, no, that happens for sure. When you're doing your leagues, we'll get to the next league in a minute. Do you prefer daily transactions or weekly transactions, and how do those affect how you draft at all?
They do for sure affect my draft strategy. I prefer daily. I've always been a daily player. I like the action. I like being, you know, having something to do every day instead of just set it and, you know, see what happens this week. That said, I've got a shit ton of leagues going now. I've probably got 12 leagues already, and I'm sure I'm going to get into that 20 area by the time the year starts, because, you know, you just keep getting invited to more leagues, and who can say no, right?
Yeah, and that's the problem with daily leagues right there, is once you start accumulating so many of them, it's tough to keep up that way.
Right. It's a full-time job. I go to work. I got a real job, and I spend the first hour of the day just setting all my lineups. Yeah, it's not great, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I enjoy every minute of it, but if you're busy at work or something, you got to make sure you set a reminder to, there's day games that start at 1 Eastern time. I got to make sure to get them in and stuff like that. So definitely changes things.
Yeah. As far as draft strategy, I mean, a daily league, depending on how many transactions you're allowed and the limits they put on that, it's much more open to a streaming strategy, just making moves every day and accumulating those counting stats, much more friendly to that. A weekly league, it's already got those limits set in. Some daily leagues will put in limits to games played for each position and innings limits and stuff like that to prevent streaming. So you got to look at that type of stuff. But weekly leagues, pretty much it's built in. You set your lineup. You can't be fiddling. There is semi-weekly leagues. Like NFBC has semi-weekly leagues. Fantrax is doing semi-weekly leagues now. Those are kind of cool, where you change your lineup on Friday, so you can't be really streaming hitters or pitchers for that matter, but you can get, if you had one start from a guy in the middle of the week, then you can get him out and throw the reliever in there or something like that. So there's definitely some strategy. It's hard to give a broad strategy for all weekly and all daily lineup leagues. But I will say in weekly leagues, I tend to avoid those guys that are constantly getting nicked up and banged up, like the Ryan Brauns of the world, because they're going to be banged up at some point in the year, and then probably several times during the year, and then you're stuck with them in your lineup. They get banged up on Monday, and you got this guy locked in your lineup for the whole week. So I do tend to avoid guys like that, and I'd probably give pitching even a little bit more boost in weekly lineup leagues too.
Yeah, in the weekly lineup leagues, I definitely give pitching a boost, because you want those reliable guys. You don't have to, you can stream, and if they have one good start and one kind of start, you can still throw them out there that week if they're a 2-start pitcher. And the biggest thing that stinks, and you hit on it, is when your guy gets injured early in the week and you can't move him out. That's the killer of killers. That the multi-week ones, whatever you're calling them, mid-week ones. That's the ones that I'm intrigued to try one of these days, because that can really help you. So if you only miss a guy for a couple days instead of 5 days, it makes a tremendous difference.
Yeah, for sure.
2 catcher leagues. This has been a point of an interesting conversation a couple times. I'm a single catcher guy. We had Walter on the other day. He is a 2 catcher guy, and I know it's kind of you have your side of the table and you sit on it and you hoist the flag. What are your thoughts on 2 catcher leagues?
I'm actually just in the middle of the table. Beat on my co-host on the Ditka Sausage Pod, and we just assume get rid of catchers altogether, to be honest. I mean, the position, it really is like kickers in football to me. They're just, at least there's two, 3 good ones. I'm kind of skeptical on Posey, to be honest. He goes so high, and he's like a good middle infielder at this point. I don't understand
pretty much
why people are spending such a high pick on him. But I guess I get it. You got to reward those guys. I'm fine with whatever. I get what Walter says, that, what's the point of even having one? Everyone just waits till the end of the draft to draft them anyway. Each have their own strategy. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, really. It's just these are the settings, and deal with it, adapt.
Yeah, now if you're playing in a single catcher compared to a 2 catcher league, how do you approach that come draft time?
Single catcher, I'm pretty much waiting till the end of the draft. If one of those guys like Wilson Ramos is getting kind of disregarded this year, if he's there and if nobody else is jumping out at me, I'll grab a guy like him, Evan Gattis maybe if he falls. But generally, yeah, it's just wait. I don't want to wait till the last round, because usually there's a lot of guys doing that. So I'll third to last round or something like that. I'll grab the guy that I like, but I'm not getting attached to that guy. If the flavor of the week, I'll drop him for if they're not doing it for me.
Yep, I'm with you there completely. Kind of the third format, we did head-to-head. We talked Roto. One that's been picking up steam the last few years. I was in one a few years ago. I haven't been in one in a long time, but a points league. So What are your thoughts on those? I prefer Roto still, but these points leagues, people are starting to really make a push for them lately.
Yeah, they're interesting leagues. I've only got one points league. I try to stay well-rounded. Just, we got a podcast and we're trying to help people out. So it helps to be in all these different types of leagues. Points leagues, again, it's totally dependent on what the point settings are. There could be some crazy points leagues where, typically pitching gets a huge boost. You're getting points for every inning pitched, every strikeout, wins you get a bunch of points for. Closers, they're devalued a little bit. You get points for saves, but it's nothing compared to like the starting pitchers. They're racking up all these innings and all these strikeouts and stuff. So I think typically, pitching is the trump in points leagues. That said, like you could have this crazy league where you get just like a tenth of a point for an inning pitched or something like that, and you get like 20 points for home runs. Like you can set them up whatever way you want. So it's really tough to talk a general strategy on points leagues because it's just who has the most points each week wins. The thing I don't like about points leagues and head-to-head in general, head-to-head categories, is that you just play one team each week. So you could just get really unlucky with your schedule and have an awesome team and have the most points. And it's the same thing with like fantasy football, you just get this terrible schedule and you play the best team every week and all of a sudden you're out of the playoffs. The points league that I'm in is kind of cool. It's 24-team dynasty, and you play 6 teams each week, 6 different teams each week. So you kind of get a better sample. Okay, I played the guy that had the best score, and I lost him. I had the second best score, so I beat the other 5 teams. It makes more sense that way. Speaking generally to points, typically you've got a smaller offensive roster. From what I've seen, I think the standard is just 1 catcher, first, second, third, short, and 3 outfielders in a utility. There's no five outfielders. There's no middle infield, corner infield. So that also devalues offensive players. The top guys are still going to score a good chunk of points compared to the lower end guys, but the player pool is going to be deeper for you generally because you're not rostering this huge bench of offensive guys because you need to fill 5 outfield spots and corner infield and middle infield and 2 catchers and all that stuff. Easier to come across players with high on base percentage get a bump because you're getting points for walks usually, and steals are devalued. I think that's generally what I'd have to say about points leagues. It's totally dependent on the settings of the league.
Yeah, that's true. Because I've seen some that just go crazy on certain categories and don't care about others. So very, very valid point there. Let's talk kind of drafting. You have your regular kind of snake drafts that you see a lot, and then you have your auction drafts, which I know they're picking up steam like crazy. What do you prefer, and how do they kind of differ in your strategy?
I've ever since I came across auctions, I've been a big proponent of them. I love that you can get whatever players you want. Snake drafts, you get stuck in this box where, I've got pick 2. I could go crazy and take Kershaw or Scherzer or something like that, but I really got to take the value. If you're in pick 14 or something, you miss out on those first 13 guys. You don't even get a chance. In auction, you get to choose what players are available to you. You get to set your budget. You're in total control of constructing your team. So that's what I love about auctions. Mentioned on the show with Justin Mason last night, we've been getting into these slow auctions. I don't know if you've ever done one of those.
No, I've been hearing you guys all talking about it, and I'm kind of curious because I don't know. Like auction drafts take forever as it is, which I don't mind because I love baseball, but these slow auction ones, I just think they would terrify me, but I could be wrong.
They won't terrify you. There is a definite learning curve. They will destroy your life. Like you're just going to be staring at the screen all the time. Your significant other is probably going to hate you for a couple of weeks. You might get fired from your job. But other than that, they're awesome. So we started a dynasty league, and I wish we could have got you in there. I didn't even think to ask you, but it was 30 guys. So we had this 15-team league when every player got 2 nominations. So 30 guys are being auctioned off at all times. And we set the clocks lower. Sometimes you'll start with 24-hour clock on each player. Sometimes you'll and then it'll reset to 12 if you did 24 hours. So if there's a new high bidder under 12 hours, it'll reset up to 12 hours. So it can be really frustrating if it gets really low and you think you're going to win the guy, and then boom, 12 hours again, and you got to outbid that guy, and you get really pissed off at people. So we did 12 hours to start and 8-hour resets. So if there's a new high bidder under 8 hours, it resets. It really adds a whole new wrinkle because you're not thinking, okay, do I want to bid on Jose Altuve at this price? You're thinking, do I want to bid on Jose Altuve, Mike Trout, or this slew of 28 other players, you know? And then if you get outbid on one guy, then your money's probably going to somebody else. And there's this whole like ripple effect that goes on. And there's just so many layers of strategy in it. And everyone tends to overspend at the beginning of these things. It just happens. You know, I want to get one of the top players still, right? So like I'm going to overspend for somebody just because I have to, and then just kind of sit back. That's kind of the way that I approach them. But yeah, they're just so much fun.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you is, do you prefer to go and spend like a good chunk of your budget on like 3 or 4 guys out the gate, or do you kind of like to get 1 or 2 maybe really good guys and kind of make it more balanced after that?
Yeah, I'm a more balanced guy. I do like to get that one guy that I can really count on that I think is going to be a stud. For me this year is Trey Turner. I really like Trey Turner. He took it number 3 there. He has become my number 3. I don't know if you've seen all this stuff about the humidor now out in Arizona. I was kind of between him and Goldschmidt, and now, you know, it sounds like that could be a huge headache for offensive players in Arizona. I know Goldschmidt's Goldschmidt. He's still going to be a stud. He's still going to give you first-round talent, assuming he's healthy. But there could be a little bit of a downturn, I think, based on what I've heard about this humidor.
Yeah, you mentioned it with Turner coming up to 3, and I love Turner. Like going into last season, I was so anti-Trey Turner, it wasn't even funny, at least where he's getting drafted. Now I'm like all aboard, yes, give me him at number 3, because if he's healthy, we saw what he can do, and it's insane. Would you ever imagine yourself in a draft at the 2 spot, because, hey, we both sit at the 2 spot in a big draft, taking Trey Turner over Jose Altuve?
You know, I haven't really thought about it, but it's intriguing.
It is. Like, the more I've thought about it, because like I've come to the realization that it's highly unlikely Trout's not falling to 2. Like, that's just, if I live in a draft like that, then that whole draft's going to be chaos. But it's a real good question, I think.
You know, I bet there's more than one. I bet there's more than one of the 13 invitational drafts where Altuve is picked number 1 or Trout isn't picked at number 1. Who knows? Maybe somebody picks Kershaw or something. I think that we're going to be surprised. I don't know that it's going to be either of our drafts, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Turner brings so much speed. I really think that he's got a good shot to steal 70 bases this year. Lenny has been tempering expectations with him because it sounds like Turner's going to be batting in the 2 hole, and you know, we don't know what their running philosophy is going to be now with the new manager there. I think that he's just going to run wild. You can't, nobody can give that guy a stop signal. He's going to do it by himself, no matter what. Can't. So that's interesting. I'm going to think about it. I am.
Yeah, like as we've been approaching the March 1st go time, it has like slowly been creeping into my mind. And you look at, you know, what they both offer you, and it's interesting because can you see Altuve being this guy that was an MVP in back-to-back years? Yeah, but I could also see some serious regression coming there, which will still make him an outstanding baseball player. But you look at the steamer projections for Altuve, and he's going to get you – they're projecting 19 homers, 94 runs, 85 ribbies, 24 steals, 309 batting average, which all great numbers, maybe not number 2. Then you got Trey Turner, 17 homers, 50 stolen bases, 96 runs, 66 ribbies, and a 298 average. That stolen base number really makes me think about taking him over Altuve.
It does. I mean, I guess 2 things. I mean, we know Altuve's done it. We know he's done it for, you know, like 4 years in a row now. He's been generally really healthy, and Turner's been banged up the past 2 seasons. And with Altuve, like, you automatically get awesome trade value, and we're allowed to trade in those leagues. So I kind of just assume pick him and then shop him around and see. And if that's who I've got, that's who I've got. But maybe I can trade him to the Trey Turner, or maybe Trey Turner falls to number 7 or something, and I can get Trey Turner in a nice pitcher or something for Altuve. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I already also own a butt ton of Trey Turner. I got too many leagues, and I'd like to diversify. I really do want to win this league. Obviously, I know we all want to win the Invitational for bragging rights, but I like to diversify still. I think that I can do some good in-season management, and Altuve is a stud player. So how can I argue with that?
Yeah, that's the thing, is it's hard not to take him, but it's a conversation worth having.
It is.
When you're drafting, most of us play in the mixed leagues, AL and NL, but there's a lot of AL only, NL only leagues. Which one do you prefer, and do you what's your approach? Maybe how does your approach differ, I should say, in the onlys compared to the mix?
Well, onlys, I've only done auctions in onlys, and I really don't want to do a snake in onlys. I want to be able to control what players I get and really set a limit on myself and get a lot of mid-tier talent in only leagues. Just getting players that get playing time is important in only leagues. It's a whole new challenge. I prefer NL just because I'm a St. Louis Cardinals fan, and I prefer watching NL games. My roommate's a Cubs fan, so I watch a lot of Cubs fans. I'm in the Chicago Cubs games, so I'm in the Chicago area. I just see a lot more NL baseball. I feel that I know the player pool a little bit better. Not that I don't know AL players pretty well, but I just have a stronger connection with the NL. So it's not like the way it plays or anything like that. It's just I like the NL a little bit more. But yeah, I want a lot of mid-tier talent. If I get like one of the top picks in the AL or NL only, and I'm doing a snake, which I honestly, like I said, I never have. I only do auctions, but if I did, I'd consider shopping them around and seeing about getting a few pieces. Like I said, with a 10-team, 12-team league, like we discussed, I want the top talent. I know the player pool is going to be super deep. I know there's going to be lots of gems out there to be picked up throughout the season. I want those extra roster spots, and I want the studs. In a only league, it's the exact opposite. It's super deep. And I want a lot of mid-tier talent, well-rounded team in those leagues.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. And that's especially, like you said, AL or NL only, I want to be able to control the fact that I'm going to get some guys that I want that are going to anchor my team. Where, like in a mixed league, you obviously have a double the size of the player pool and can definitely pick those poisons. So that makes a lot of sense there. Any other fantasy draft strategy topics you're curious about or wanted to talk about before we head on to LABR?
No, I think we hit everything pretty well. I'll just reiterate that strategy is totally dependent on league, and even a lot of so-called experts out there, I think, miss that. When somebody asks them this player or that player, it's not black or white. There's not usually, I guess, unless it's Mike Trout or Jed Jerko or something like that. Yeah, there's always an answer there, but it's not cut and dry. You got to determine what type of league you're in and what valuation players have, what type of roster build you have, what your needs are to determine the valuations on players. And I think that's what separates the really good fantasy players from just the average Joe that's just, oh, this guy's really good, this guy's hyped, I want this guy, and just picking all, the hot names. You're probably not going to win your league that way. Yeah, you're going to have some exciting players, and you might have fun doing it, which that's important too. But I want to win also, and you got to know what your league is, what your settings are, what you need to do to win. That's the best thing that I can say.
No, that's a great point. I've told people that when I put my rankings out during the weeks, I always put a caveat in the article that says, "Hey, make sure you have your. If you have any questions, basically, come find me, because these are just kind of like a baseline of what they are. That's going to change based on what you have going on, and so on and so forth." So I completely agree with you there. That's a very valid point to have. Let's talk about the LABR draft. It took place on Tuesday night, 15-team mix LABR draft, bunch of experts in here from all over the industry. And, the first round for the most part went business as usual. Kershaw did go number 3. Turner went number 4. Goldie dropped down to 7, but so on and so forth. You had all the big 4 pitchers gone by pick 14. Sporer got the last one. Anything that stood out in like the early few rounds that really surprised you?
Let's see here. I jotted down some notes. I guess with the early picks, I'm not a fan of Kershaw. I'm really not a fan of him in the first round, to be honest. Some people might think I'm crazy, but I like the other 3 more than him. I have them ranked currently as Scherzer, Kluber, Sale, then Kershaw. So I'm pretty much never going to end up taking Kershaw. I think I've got him on 1 keeper league, so that'll probably be the only share that I have, and I'll probably try to trade him. Not that he isn't great, not that there isn't a solid chance that he puts up another amazing Clayton Kershaw year, but I also think that the risk is just too much with those herniated discs. Athletes, they're not immortals. We've seen the past 2 years he's had issues. Some people debate whether last year they were just being extra cautious with him and doing the Dodgers thing, giving everybody rest. They had like a 9-man rotation last year. That may have been it, but I personally think that he's got back issues and his back's never going to be the same, and it's just going to get worse and worse. Look at Tiger Woods, man. He dropped off pretty damn quick when he got a back issue, right?
Oh, yeah, and I'm with you on Kershaw. The back problems scare me. I have a bad back. I know what it's like. It flares up on you. It never goes away, basically. So it is terrifying. He's a big guy. He uses a lot of his body through that movement and that windup that he has there. I'm with you. I have Scherzer, then Kluber, then Sale before Kershaw as well. So I completely agree with everything you're saying, and I've gotten weird looks for it also.
Yeah, well, and people say, well, okay, you've got back issues, but you're a middle-aged man that's out of shape, right? But
exactly.
But so it's not the same with Kershaw, but it is the same. It's a spine. A herniated disc is a herniated disc. There's material, and no offense, I mean you look like you're in great shape.
I'm in a great shape. I'm round. Yes. Yes.
But also, it's risk reward to me, and that's what it comes down to. He could have a great season, and I'm totally cool missing out on that because Scherzer is most likely going to have a great season again too, and he's on a great team, and he gives me pretty much everything that Kershaw is going to give without the back. So
and
I get it.
When I'm taking a first round pick, I want to have some confidence that, barring something crazy like Trey Turner, sliding or messing up something, or, Bryce Harper slipping over a base, that this guy is going to be my
dirt bike.
Yeah, riding a goddamn dirt bike. Like, oh man, when that news came across last year, I could have broke something. It was just like little things like that, freak injuries. I don't want to worry about that. Manny Machado went 13th to Stefania Bell. It's a guy that it's mixed reactions depending on who you talk to. He's going to have shortstop eligibility eventually this year. If not, depending on your league format, might have it out the gate, but shouldn't most likely. What's your thoughts on a guy like Machado going 13th when you have some other guys that definitely, like Chris Bryant or Votto, Freeman, Lindor, a lot of guys that you could see going ahead of him going?
Yeah, well, first off, I think we'd both take Kluber over him there. Off the bat, he's the last ace there. Nobody's making it back to you. I mean, I guess
Carlos Correa.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Correa fan. I wish that he would steal. Like I feel like he's got the speed.
Sure.
But he's a stud. You can't argue that. I can't argue with Machado there. I think he's going to have another great year. I probably wouldn't do it. I've seen him go mid to even late second round in some drafts. So not that has an impact. If you like a guy, take him, I guess is what I would tell you. But there's guys I like more. I'm with you. I'd rather have Kluber. I'd rather have Chris Bryant. I'd probably rather have Joey Votto. He just seems to be getting better. Freddie Freeman is intriguing too. I love getting him early second round, but I'd probably take him over Machado, to be honest. He was having an amazing first half until he got hurt last year. But yeah, like I said, if you like a guy, take him. Manny Machado is not going to be a guy that loses you your league,
Well, that's true, and it comes down to it is Machado wasn't going to be there. Well, maybe she had the turnaround, so he could have been there. In most drafts, you have the whole theory of like, okay, take a guy, especially in a middle round pick, that he's not going to be there when he comes back to you. But you mentioned you got Votto, Freeman, Rizzo, Bryant. There's a handful of guys that I think could have went there, but she teamed him up with Bumgarner. Not a horrible start by any means, and like you said, he's not going to lose you a league, and he's going into a contract here, so maybe he does one of those crazy contract things and this goes just off the rails for him.
Sure, and you know that's a start that you would have been ecstatic with last year. So
exactly, and there's a lot to that. Take advantage of value or something about like the last year's darlings that kind of lost some luster coming into this year. A guy that had a great 2017 was Jose Ramirez. He went middle of the second round. He's a guy that I've seen just climb up the board. He's kind of a late, 20th, like 18th to 20th pick. What's your thoughts on Jose Ramirez?
That's probably about the right spot for him. I think there's other guys that I would have pulled the trigger on there. I probably take, Cody Bellinger, maybe Josh Donaldson there over him. But I think that's generally about the right spot to take Jose Ramirez. I don't think that he's a 29 home run hitter. I watched a lot of Indian games down the stretch. I'm not sure why. I think I might have owned a lot of their pitchers or something like that. But a lot of his home runs, they came in the last month. I think he hit like 8 home runs in the last month, something crazy like that. And a lot of them just barely got out. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those turned into doubles this coming year. He's still going to have a great year. I could see him hitting 20 home runs, though, with, 15 to 20 steals and, 300 average, maybe a little over 300. He's going to have great counting stats. That's great, a great floor to have. Not super excited about him at that spot, but it's probably around the right area. What do you think?
No, I agree. It's about the right area. I'm not sold on it. I kind of have the same feelings you do, where it's really, really good ball player, does the 5 categories really well, but I don't know if they're well enough to go where he's going. But at the same time, would you be shocked if he exceeded last year? Probably not. Like, he is a good ball player, young, still figuring things out. So it wouldn't shock me by any means if he made a jump. I just don't know at that level if the power numbers are what you want. But then again, it was Mike Podhoser that took him. He took Goldie in round 1, and he followed it up with Rhys Hoskins. So he's not looking for Jose Ramirez to be that power guy. He's probably looking more to be the average, get some steals, score some runs, which he's definitely going to do in that lineup. So it worked out well in his format. Comes back to what you were saying before. You draft based on what your team needs and your league and all that kind of stuff. And it all fills out that way.
Yeah, and if you're going into the draft with a certain idea of team construction and he's the guy that fits that and you had that idea going in, then yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and then we'll talk just team construction in general. He took a guy in the 5th round. Somehow I don't know how he's falling that far because I hated Will Myers forever. But the more you look at his fantasy value, if you put his bad batting average to the side, he steals over 20 bases. He hits over 30 home runs. He does everything you want. You can get him late or middle of the 5th round in this draft. He's one of those guys that just fills categories as you're drafting your team that can be tremendous value. What are your thoughts on a guy like Will Myers?
I'm not crazy about him, but again, team construction. And those steals are great out of a first baseman. I'm totally with you. We kind of know what he is now. He's going to give you about 30-20.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit less in each this year, I'd say. But that, you're right. It is nice value there. I think that's about the right area, maybe a late 4th round, because that average could be rough. And I don't know about the supporting cast there are my question marks. He's going to be a good player. Just not crazy about him. I like high average guys early, to be honest, so I can take shots later on guys that might hurt my average, and I'll still have a solid average.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask you, middle of the 2nd round, Aaron Judge, late 2nd round, Cody Bellinger, 2 Rookie of the Years from last year, and everyone is very high on these guys. Where do you see these guys going this year?
Well, in drafts, you mean?
Or how do you view them this year?
I think they're about the same area in value. I honestly would rather have Bellinger. It's close for me. Probably not drafting either of them based off of one season. There's just guys I like more in that area. I don't think Judge is going to fully repeat. I wouldn't be surprised if Bellinger did. I mean, he didn't put up a totally insane season like Judge. Bellinger, there's just something about him. He just seems like he's going to be a really good hitter for his whole career. I liked what I saw in the playoffs where he was struggling and was able to adjust. I think that he's always going to be able to do that. I think he's a really smart hitter. I'm kind of jury's still out on the Judge. For me, obviously he's got amazing power and he's probably a pretty safe bet to hit 40 home runs. I'm just not sure that the average is going to be anywhere close to what it was last year. I guess that's the main thing, the differentiator.
I completely agree with that. That's kind of my thoughts on it as well. That average is not going to be sustainable. At least I don't think it's going to be. Something that stood out in this draft, I don't take relief pitchers too early too often, but we saw Jansen and Kimbrel go back into the third round, and then we wait until the sixth round, and then we see Chapman, Osuna, and Corey Knebel all go in the sixth round. So to me, that is early for some relief pitchers. You got Edwin Diaz in the seventh to go with Felipe Rivero and Cody Allen. So it was going off the board quick. Brad Handon, Ken Giles, Doolittle, Wade Davis in the eighth. So there was quite the run. What are your thoughts on all the early relief pitching?
So I'm with you generally. That has been my strategy to wait on relievers and not spend an early pick. But recent years, I'm starting to change my tune on that, to be honest. And not for all leagues, but for a league like this where you're going against some sharp competition and it's a 15-team league. I believe there's fab in this league, so it's going to be competitive on the wire as far as picking up saves throughout the season. They drafted like 28 or 29 rounds in this thing between 15 players. So I think that's 435 players. I did the math earlier. There's a lot of setup guys owned. A lot of the guys that are going to fall into saves that you don't expect are already owned in this league. And the competitive leagues, the really competitive leagues that I was in last year, saves were tough. They were tough to come by throughout the year, and it made a difference having a guy that you could hang your hat on. So I'm a little bit more prone this year than in past years to spend up for, maybe like Tim McLeod did there and Edwin Diaz in round 7, where, you're not at the beginning. You're not on the high end of the run, but you're catching somebody that can still be an elite closer that's probably not going to lose his job. He did for a little bit last year. He is a little bit risky, I'd say, but man, he's got some good stuff and he's got the potential to be one of the best closers in the game. So I'm probably more prone this year than any other year to take one of those closers in a deeper league. Shallower league, head-to-head leagues, that's a little bit different for me.
Like if you do take one early, would you rather go with the philosophy to take a second one rather soon so you have two just lights out closers, or are you thinking, okay, I got one really good one that's going to carry it so I can pair them with whoever later?
Yeah, I see a lot of these teams took one and they didn't even back it up with a guy that's looking at saves to start the year, which, that's, I guess, a way to go. I don't really agree with that. I'd like somebody that's looking at saves right now that might have the job for the whole year. So I got two guys, what is there, 32 baseball teams? I don't even know how many teams are in the MLB right now. 30. So there's 30 closers out there and there's 15 teams. So everybody should have two, right?
So.
Some of these teams are going to have 4. So It's going to be tough to compete in saves. You're looking at 5 points in saves probably, unless you're able to hit the jackpot on the wire more than once.
Now we got a very interesting thing as I was watching this go through on Tuesday. Scott Pianowski, like the old school strategy of pitching was you don't take a pitcher till late. That has obviously changed, as we've talked about already. So P now goes 11 rounds, and in the 12th round finally takes a pitcher, and it's Andrew Miller as his first pitcher. His first 2 starting pitchers is Teheran and Kevin Gausman in rounds 14 and 15. He's got hitting locked down, but that pitching is suspect. Is this a philosophy you could ever wrap your head around these days?
It's not for me. It's definitely not for me. I just, I do have some notes here jotted down on this. When I looked over the draft, he did this. Let's see. Podhorzer did it to a certain extent. He didn't take one until round 7, but he took Arrieta, who, we don't know where he's going to land or what he's going to be this year, really. But I like that much more than waiting and taking Andrew Miller in the 12th round. And then there was one other team that did this to a certain extent that I didn't mind. I'll have to jump back to that. I don't like what Scott did here. That said, it might work out. He's a good player. I just don't see it. I don't see how he can be even remotely competitive in pitching categories with Julio Teheran, Kevin Gausman, Tanner Roark, Jake Odorizzi, and Matt Shoemaker as his starting pitchers. It's almost like this was like an auto draft team. It's I just don't see it. I don't see, and he doesn't even have any closers.
No, when I was talking to him about it, he was saying he's just looking for ratios and everything now, and he'll figure the rest out later. So I'm not a fan. I guess Andrew Miller he does, but yeah, when he said that Hader, maybe Ziegler, he's a closer technically starting out the year, but Soria is supposed to be the closer for Chicago to start the year. But yeah, starters wise, there's no ratios you're going to want really. It looks like.
Oh,
so yeah.
Here, let me see. Who was the other team? What did you think of what Podhorzer did there?
Because he waited until round 7 to get Arrieta, which I would have started out with a different starter. I'm just not big on Arrieta at all this year. But having Goldie, Ramirez, Hoskins, Elvis Andrus, Will Myers, and Sano to start out with, I like a lot. But then I was curious. He goes with guys like Greg Bird and Ciarte, Eric Thames, Jason Kipnis. But he did help out his pitching quite a bit after that. Not really, because Alex Wood and Kenta Maeda, Sean Manaea, a lot of question marks there. I do like Luis Gohara quite a bit. I think that's a good pick at 18. That kid could be really special. But as a whole, like his pitching, to me, has a lot to be desired still, especially with other pitchers you see go around that area. Now, like you said, when we started talking strategy, a lot of value is based on, kind of the eye of the beholder is the way I see it in baseball. So to him, maybe these guys rated out well. But like his best pitcher to me is Danny Salazar, which got round 11. And that's a big question mark at times. So I don't know. What were your thoughts on it?
I think I like it a little bit more than it sounds like you do. It's not the approach that I would take, but that said, having taken that approach and gotten to round 7, I'm with you. I'm not really high on Arrieta, but you could do worse to anchor your staff. He could be good. He could be his old self. I'm really interested to see where he lands. And what kind of defense he's got behind him, because everything that I've read, he's really dependent on having a good infield. He induces a lot of ground balls, and I think that was a lot of his success in Chicago. They had a good infield there helping him out, and he wasn't as sharp last year as he was in previous years. So I'm with you. I'm not a big Arrieta guy. Danny Salazar, I've always had a soft spot for him. Yeah, he kills me every single year, but he shows those flashes of ace potential. Maybe this is the year he finally puts it together. Doubtful. He'll probably have those stretches where he looks like an ace like he usually does. Alex Wood's a guy. I have him like I've got stars all over his name here because I can't believe he fell this far in this draft. I'm actually.
You like Alex Wood, huh?
I do like Alex Wood. Looking at him last year, there's something about his delivery, the way that he is hiding the ball and hesitating as he delivers it. It looks just like Clayton Kershaw to me. And, they're together. I assume as a lefty in LA on the same team as Clayton Kershaw, you're probably going to get a few pointers from him. He put up some amazing numbers last year. Yeah, he's an injury risk. Yeah, you're probably not going to get much more than 160 innings from him the way the Dodgers manage their team. But at pick 174, I just can't believe that he fell that far. I've seen him go top 100 in mock drafts. I don't know that I'd really get on board that early, but I really like what I saw from him last year. Again, I like that flash of Clayton Kershaw that I see there. Maybe I'm crazy, but go out there and take a look. Pull up some highlights of Alex Wood last year versus Clayton Kershaw. I think you're going to see the same thing that I see. He looks like him. That excites me, especially at pick 174. I'm with you on
real quick. I want to ask you some more about Alex Wood, and we can keep going on this. So the part that scares me, the second half doesn't scare you at all. I know we're talking, these aren't the advanced stats here, but just on his quick splits on Fangraphs, 1.67 ERA compared to 3.89, only 9 fewer innings. He gave up 23 more hits in the second half and fewer innings. Earned runs doubled. Home runs, he only gave 2 in the first half, 13 in the second half. Only struck out 54 in the second half compared to 97 in the first half. That stuff scares me quite a bit, but you're not too worried about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, he definitely faded. He was rested quite a bit. He still put up a 3.89 ERA in the second half.
Yeah, which is really good.
It's pretty solid these days. That's even if he has 3.89 for the whole season, that's helping your team. Anything under a 4 these days is pretty darn good. Trying to see what was his second half whip, because I think he was still pretty solid in the whip department through the second half. Let's see, 1.24. Yeah, I mean he was just absolutely dominant the first half.
You there?
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, man. Sorry about that.
No worries. I will edit that out. Piece of cake.
Where did I lose you?
About Alex Wood and his splits.
Yeah, so I was saying before we got interrupted there, yeah, he was not as good in the second half, but he was just out of this world in the first half, right?
Yep.
He put up decent numbers in the second half still, 3.89 ERA, 1.25 whip. He's not going to be that first half pitcher. I'm not expecting that, but I think somewhere in the middle there is a reasonable expectation. Again, he's probably not going to give you more than 160 innings. I really like the potential at pick 174.
Definitely. Now you were talking about Luis Gohara. What were your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I'm with you. I can't believe he hung around that late in experts draft. Where was it? Pick 264. That's pretty much where he was going over the winter. And I was very excited to be getting him that late in drafts. This guy's got a ton of potential. I think anybody that watched him closely last year is pretty excited about him.
Yeah, when I'm looking at the other pitchers that went before him, like 2 rounds prior, he got Sean Manaea. I'd take Gohara over him. Like you look at guys like Aaron Sanchez, yeah, maybe, but Lamet and Corbin, they're pretty close to him. Mikolas out of St. Louis, who you probably have a good eye on these days. There's just a handful of guys. I'd rather roll the dice on Gohara, but I see the angles, I guess. What were some of the other teams that you thought did well? Because I thought the best quote-unquote teams that were drafted with Gardner, Zinke, Rudy Gamble, and Ray Murphy, that little area. Todd Zoles is pretty good too, but that 2 through 5, I'm a big fan of how those drafts played out.
That's interesting. We only have – I had 3 favorite teams picked out, and only one of them was in the teams that you mentioned. It was Rudy Gamble's team.
I love his team.
Yeah, it's a solid team. It might be my favorite. It's up there in the top 2. My other 2 favorites were Tim McLeod's team. Okay. I really like what he did there, and the sleeper and the bust, Jason Collette and Paul Sporer. I like their team a lot as well. I did want to say, while we were talking about those guys punting pitchers, there was one other team that did that. Well, I guess not fully, but Brett Sayre drafted his first starter in round 5 with Jose Quintana, and he didn't follow it up till round 8 with Iglesias and round 9 with Kyle Hendricks. He was able to grab some nice high upside guys later in John Gray, Blake Snell. Lucas Giolito is intriguing. Carlos Rodon, he got him really late, fortunately, but I don't know what's going on with that injury.
You mentioned Quintana. Like, he took Quintana a pick before Aaron Nola went. I'm a huge Nola guy. Would you rather have Quintana or Nola?
I'd rather have Nola, and I'm not even that big of a Nola fan. Yeah. Quintana, I mean, he's always been that safe guy that you could count on for, 180 innings, 180 quality innings, a lot of quality starts. He has moved to a good team, but he just wasn't that good last year. I don't know. He doesn't do it for me. He doesn't have the ace potential. Really, his ceiling is a solid number 2. If you're waiting that long to grab a starter, I just assume grab a guy like Nola that could be an ace. Yeah,
definitely. His team wasn't bad, but going to Rudy's, and another one I did like. I do like where DVR's team went. It's a little different, kind of has a couple holes, but the gambles he took I liked. I'm big on Wilson Ramos, getting him in the 12th round when other catchers went way earlier. He's probably the 11th or 12th catcher off the board. The Johnny VR, David Dahl back-to-back in rounds 13 and 14 too. Tremendous upside guys. VR could bounce back. David Dahl coming off injuries, 20 steal potential with him. Clevenger, a nice young pitcher down there. You got Kingery, who I do think is going to have a nice year there. Dustin Fowler, so on and so forth. But talking Rudy Gamble's team, what is it that stood out to you?
Well, let's go back to Derek Van Rippers. I had some notes on his team too. He was an honorable mention for me as well. I really like those first 4 picks that you mentioned there: Scherzer, Freeman, Jansen. Yeah, we talked about that. A little bit of a reach, but he's the top closer. Not many people are going to argue with that. Nelson Cruz, ageless wonder. Aaron Nola, we already mentioned. He's got that stud closer in Cody Allen, most likely, I would think. He got good value on Ryan Braun after pick 100. Not a huge fan of the guys he got later. His steals are really dependent on VR, it looks like. I'm not sure that I really want to be putting all of my eggs in that basket based on the playing time that he saw down the stretch last year. But it could be a good team. I think it's up there in the top half. Who really knows until the season gets going? Going over to Rudy's team, obviously we both love Trey Turner. If you get Trey Turner on a team, I'm probably gonna like it. Ronald Acuna. I mean, I can't believe he fell this far in this draft.
I swore he would have gone so much earlier than that. That was crazy.
Yeah, and what pick was that? It was after 100, right? 100
and 15, 90, 120.
124.
Yeah, 124.
Yeah, I'm in, man. If he falls past 90, I'm totally on board grabbing him. He's probably not going to be up until late April, early May, something like that. But he's the kind of guy that you can stash, and he could win you your league. We've been seeing these guys every year, the Cody Bellinger, Aaron Judge types, like the young guys, the really good ones. They're becoming more common. I don't know what it is, but I'm buying in on Acuna this year. Rudy didn't get it. Yeah.
Well, I like his Willie Calhoun pick around 15.
Yeah, I'm on board there too. And it looks like he's got a job out of spring. That guy can hit.
He did. Rudy's draft was weird to me because I was completely on board as he's going through it. Severino, I absolutely love. If you don't get one of those big, let's say 6, if you count Strasburg and Bumgarner, Severino's like my next guy. Darvish, I don't hate. Posey, you never know, but it goes well with his team because it fills things. Because his next pick's Rudy Odor, so Posey gives him the average. You just go down the list. I love what he's doing. DeJong, questionable. Maikel Franco stands out as a big question mark to me. I was really shocked by that pick. And then you go down a little farther, Hunter Renfroe. If he picks his average up a little bit, could be tremendous. But other than that, most of his guys have pretty good floors with upside. I love what he's done with his team the more I look at it.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, for not getting one of those top arms, I really like that core to his pitching staff with Severino, Darvish, and Samardzija is a guy that I'm really high on. We talked about that yesterday with Justin Mason. You can get him at pick 130 in a lot of drafts. There's not many more dependable guys to give you, as an innings eater. He's going to get you 200 innings. He's done it each of the last 4 or 5 seasons or something like that. His numbers last year were a lot better than they looked. The underlying numbers say he should have been better. He had some rough goes at Coors, so you're going to bench him there, and that'll do wonders. He got a good closer in Felipe Rivero. He backed him up with Brad Boxberger, who I like later. The one pick I didn't really like was that Posey pick at 64. But, hey, if you like him, whatever. The later guys, you mentioned Willie Calhoun. I like Justin Bohr. I'm big on him this year. He's not going to have a lot of support, not going to get a lot of runs and RBIs there, but yeah, he's going really late. The Nelson Lamette's a very intriguing high strikeout guy. And Derek Fisher at the end of the draft. I was surprised he hung around so late. There were reports a couple days ago. Maybe it was. Yeah, he might be their left fielder, and he's got a lot of upside. So, yeah, I'm with you. I really like Rudy's team a lot.
Yeah, and the more like a Tim McLeod's team, I wasn't all aboard as he was drafting it, but then it's like you said, you have a strategy coming in, you have your guys, you fill it out. Until he gets to about, I'd say, Austin Hedges, there's probably some other catchers I would have looked at, but I don't hate it. Christian Vasquez I could care less about, but I guess I see it. But other than that, he has a lot of really good players. I love that Walker Buehler pick. Like Charlie Tilson's at Trevor Williams. Some gambles there, but those are their last picks in the draft. I do like his team the more I look at it. There's a lot of young players there that could burn you. We've seen that before, but all in all, it's a pretty good squad. Yeah,
totally agree. There's some risk there, but he didn't take it so much early. I mean, how can you argue with the Trout, Strasburger, Benintendi, Carlos Martinez start, right?
Yeah, like his first 12 rounds, I'm all aboard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like the value he got on Devers or however you say Raphael's name out there in Boston. What's that pick 120 there? I've seen him going inside 100. Yeah, it's a little bit of a reach if you're taking him inside of 100. But he's another one of those young guys. He's only 23 years old, 22 or 23. He's just looked mature beyond his years in his half season up there with Boston, or less than half season. I could see him doing some really nice things. He's going to have a solid average. I like that Tim got that Edwin Diaz that we talked about before. I would have liked him backing it up with another closer that has a job right now. He did get Zach Britton in round 15, which personally I think is a little bit of a reach for a guy that is going to be gone for at least half of the year, and we don't really know. There's talks of him being back aggressively, but I'm not so sure about grabbing Britton there.
Yeah, it's sketchy.
I like Arcia a lot. That's another guy I like a lot.
Yeah, he's fallen quite a bit to get him late like he did there. All right, before we wrap this up, any final thoughts on the LABR? Because we could probably pick every team apart for hours if we really wanted to. There's a lot to take in with it, because there's a lot of different strategies, it looks like, that were taking place on this.
Yeah, you know what? There's some values that I had jotted down that I really like. I'll throw out at you. You don't seem to like Thor a whole lot this year, huh? Because you're saying that he's a tier below those top 6 guys. He went at 38. I thought that was nice value.
It's good value. Because what I have is I have the top 4, and then I have like a Strasburg Bumgarner tier, and then I have it's Thor, Carrasco, Severino, Verlander, and DeGrom. I think that's those 5 in the next tier. And I want to make sure I have like 2 guys out of those 12 guys or whatever. That's what I would love to have as a starting point. But that's where I don't hate Thor. He's just another injury concern for me.
He's an injury concern, but he's the kind of guy that can be the number 1 overall pitcher. That's why
definitely
I'm buying in on him, the strikeouts and just his unbelievable stuff. Ohtani at 83. Let's hit on that before we finish up here. What do you think about Ohtani?
I really, really like Ohtani. I'm really, really looking forward to watching Ohtani. I am just terrified to draft Ohtani because he's only going to pitch once a week, as long as he's not your ace, as he's his number 2 for Syndergaard. So that actually works out pretty well. I can get behind that. I guess at 83, I can go with it. I'm worried he's going to keep moving up the draft boards, and that scares me. That terrifies me. But if you get around 83, I can get with it. If you can use him in the leagues where you can use his bats the days he plays, daily leagues, he's a lot more valuable to me. The weekly leagues kind of scares me a bit, I'll be honest, but I don't mind it. What were your thoughts on him at 83?
No, absolutely. You're right on with the daily league. You can move him into your offense. We don't know what kind of hitter he's going to be really, but man, that arm – those pitches look nasty. These Japanese guys, when they come over, they seem to have their best season the first year, the first time through the league when the book hasn't been written on them. I'm really excited about him. Lenny kind of teared this. Lenny Melnick, I'm over there on his site. He tore this draft apart, and he was very critical on some of these picks. That was one of them. I'm on board. I would draft him there even in a weekly league. Yeah, I don't really want him as my number 2. He's more of a number 3 for me, but I got him as my number 2 in the mock that we're doing. I'm okay with that. I think he could bring ace type numbers, probably only 150, 160 innings, but at pick 83, I think that's fair to solid value. The other guy that Lenny really tore apart was Daniel Murphy being taken in the 5th round. I think that's okay value. Yeah, he might miss 2 months. He might also miss 2 weeks, and he's a guy that would be drafted in the top 50 easy if he were fully healthy. So I guess to wrap it up, who the heck knows? The second half of this draft, it's such a deep league, 435 players being drafted. After pick 200, it's like you're throwing darts, really. Who do you like? Take whoever you like, and can't really judge these teams too strongly. I didn't run the numbers or anything. It's a numbers game, Yep. I'm just basing it on the cores that I see and who's got what they've got. So those are the teams that I like. It'll be interesting to see how this league plays out.
I am very curious to see how this league plays out. I want to see. I have to look into it. There's got to be a way we can follow it, because I want to see the transactions that take place, the ad drops, the trades, because a lot of these teams, there's going to be some definite moves being made just based on some of the gambles they took. One last gamble I wanted to ask you, like, stuck out to me right now. In round 19, Victor Robles, he went to, I believe that was Ray Murphy of Baseball HQ in round 19. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a good pick. He's got as much upside as anybody. Obviously, Adam Eaton isn't fully trustworthy, and neither is Michael Taylor. I'm actually a huge Michael Taylor fan this year. I'll admit to that. So I'm a little bit lower on Robles because he's a little bit more blocked in my book than other people's. But man, round 19, that seems really late for a guy with his type of potential.
Yeah, I'm with you there. There's a lot to like about it. Like you said, let's see how it all plays out. Let's see how the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational plays out. There's a lot of fun coming up, and it's only February 15th. So pitchers and catchers just reported about a month and a half to go, a little over a month till we get real baseball. But DonkeyTeeth, thanks for joining us, man. I appreciate it. Make sure you guys check him out on Twitter at DonkeyTeeth87. His work's at Lenny Melnick FantasySports.com. He mentioned the baseball draft guide coming out here in the next week or so. So go check that out. A lot of good stuff, a lot of good people over there. You know, Paul Martin, Walter, they're not bad. They're okay people. But go check it all out. And his podcast, Ditka Sausage and Fantasy Sports. I listened to that Justin Mason one this morning. Always good content they put out there. So, DonkeyTeeth, thanks for joining me, man. Hey,
man. Thanks a lot, Bubba. I really appreciate you having me on. And anytime I'm around.
Yeah, we'll definitely do this again throughout the season. We'll have some fun talking baseball, football, maybe some get behind the meaning of the sausage part of Ditka Sausage and Fantasy. We'll dig deep on this, but until then,
the Superfan skit from SNL where they're it's just a bunch of guys from Chicago talking about the Bears.
This one they're all sitting around the table.
Yeah, sausage.
Okay, gotcha. There you go.
Yep.
There you go.
You got it.
Awesome. I love it. But thanks again, man. I appreciate it. Everybody, this was Bench with Bubba, episode 72. I'll catch you guys next time.
Night, buddy.